Running a traffic break at the summit, so expect at least a brief delay there. Northbound 17 near Idlewild. And the Bay Bridge, look at a little fender bender happened right before you get to the tunnel, but these vehicles managed to pull over to that narrow right-hand shoulder, so you should be okay. In fact, traffic at the Bay Bridge has been very light all morning. Chilling out about a collision cam, looking at a stalled vehicle in San Francisco, about to hook this up north 101 at Vermont Street. The traffic has been so light, even with a stall out there. We're still at the speed limit on north 101, so go figure coming into San Francisco, really easy for a change. And get traffic when you need it 24/7 on X at KCBS AM/FM Traffic from the traffic leader, KCBS. Thank you, Kim. Visit Mancini Sleep World during our President's Day sale or visit sleepworld.com. Here's your Mancini Sleep World 6-day forecast. Isolated, on again, off again showers. Potential for a thunderstorm and some wind gusts up to 30 miles per hour through the afternoon. Highs in the 60s. Wind advisory, high surf advisory in effect until tomorrow morning. This storm is likely to weaken significantly by midday tomorrow, but the possibility of localized flooding may linger because the soil will be supersaturated. Flood watch doesn't expire until Wednesday morning. Bay Area-wide, ponding of water on roadways, low-lying intersections will be problematic. Some creeks and streams in rural areas will be reaching their banks. A break on Thursday and Friday from the rain. Light showers returning next Saturday through Monday. Current temperatures around the Bay. San Jose, you're looking at 60 degrees. It's 58 degrees in San Francisco and 57 degrees in Oakland. Traffic and weather together on the 8th and All News 106.9 and AM 740 KCBS.
When the rains hit, is your home ready? Armstrong's durable and long-lasting foam roofing system isn't just about keeping water out. Experience savings on heating and cooling costs by up to 40%. That means staying warmer in the winter and even cooler in the summer. Free estimates when you call toll-free 855-777-1234 or visit us online at armstrong1234.com. Since 1966, Armstrong, license 245291.
It is time now for Ask an Expert every weekday at this time on KCBS. We're giving you direct access to top experts in various fields. And today, as we pay tribute to the American presidents of the past, we share a recently published poll that examines presidents throughout American history.
Yeah, we were talking about this a bit earlier, and it was so interesting that Margie and I were tossing things.
We had to get you back.
We had to go back to Justin Vaughn, Associate Professor of Political Science at Coastal Carolina University, about this poll that rated the presidents down through history. And we also noted, Justin, that many of the most polarizing presidents were during our lifetime.
Yeah, that's right. I think that there's a couple reasons for that. One is that they are modern and that we've lived through them and we're still kind of contesting them and figuring out what their historical legacy would be. And then the other is that our lifetime has unfortunately been characterized by some of the greatest partisan polarization in American history. And so those two factors make it kind of pretty likely that for a long while there'll be a lot of polarization in how people assess Republicans and Democrats of the contemporary era.
Yeah, let's break it down for our listeners. Who are the most polarizing presidents?
That's a great question. So we asked that question actually, and among our expert respondents, and President Trump was overwhelmingly identified as the most polarizing president, followed by Andrew Jackson, Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan, and Richard Nixon. And then President Biden is not in that top five. I think he comes in eighth most polarizing. But interestingly enough, if you look at public opinion polls, you'll see that both Trump and Biden have extreme degrees of polarization in terms of the public approval levels of them by Republicans or Democrats, respectively.
And also for our listeners who weren't with us earlier, can you break down who you talked to take this poll?
Yeah, we talked to experts in the American presidency. A lot of them were political science professors, but there were also historians, communications scholars. I think there was even an English scholar who studies presidential rhetoric that took the survey. So they're all academic experts who focus primarily on presidential politics.
So I think we can understand instantaneously why Donald Trump might be the most polarizing president, and Richard Nixon as well for his legacy. What made Ronald Reagan so polarizing?
Well, I think it's again the the fact that we're in this kind of polarized moment that really traces back to, you might hear my pug in the background. She's a big Ronald Reagan fan, and so she's objecting to the idea that he's a polarizing figure. I think that, Reagan kicked off the kind of modern presidential era. A lot of the transformations of the presidency that occurred in his administration we're still living through, and so many of the presidents, Biden, Trump, Obama, we can still say are kind of presidents in the age of Reagan, so to speak. And so because he's kind of that first kind of contemporary president, and when that era of polarization really kicked off, I think there's still a contested legacy about the relative kind of the normative impact of Reagan on the institution of the presidency.
It's interesting in looking at some of these charts. This is a poll that you've been doing since 2015, so for quite a while now. And Reagan has gone down considerably since the beginning of this polling, and Kennedy has gone up. And I'm just wondering about the politicalness of that, if anything, or how they're being evaluated.
Yeah, no, I think that there is a political dimension of it, and so historically, when presidential scholars have talked about this idea of presidential greatness, it's generally been understood to mean something along the lines of the presidents who kind of did most to expand or evolve the institution, that led the nation at times of great crisis or military victory. But in recent years, I think there's been also a complementary focus on kind of normative standards of behavior and perceptions of what's good for American democracy, and kind of judging presidents on those individual characteristics or behaviors. As you might expect, the respondents that we have are college professors that are more likely to be Democrats than Republicans. And so I think that what we've seen over the last few polls that we've done, which is spread over basically the last decade, is increasing focus on some of those normative behaviors and where the individual politics of the respondent come into play a little bit more on top of their understanding, kind of scholarly understanding of the institution of the presidency.
I'm glad you brought up crises in the presidency, because at least in the 20th century, let's go back to presidents got the benefit of the doubt during wartime. Woodrow Wilson's number 15 in your poll, and FDR ranks very high in your poll. But I'm interested in how President Johnson ranks, because he had a war and it didn't go too well.
Yeah, that's you're right. He did have a war and it didn't go too well. But I think at the same time he's increasingly viewed as a civil rights leader, maybe despite his personal politics or his rise from the politics of the South or from Texas, he's recognized for being the person that signed into law a lot of those major 1960 civil rights acts, which we haven't seen the likes of really since. And so, as the memories of that war, may fade a little bit, but the recognition of the civil rights accomplishment kind of linger and grow, I think that balances it out. But in terms of your comment about the benefit of the doubt, I think you're spot on in that that's not really given as much today. Obviously we saw an extended rally around the flag factor after 9/11, but otherwise, for the most part, if a national kind of trauma occurs, that today Democrats aren't really going to be any more likely to rally around a President Trump, and Republicans aren't going to be any more likely to rally around a President Biden. And if they do, it's not going to be for long. Same thing with honeymoons, right? We used to see that when a new president came in, their numbers would be really high because even a number of the people from the other party who didn't vote for them were like, okay, well, they're the new president, let's give him a shot. And if we look at President Biden, President Trump, not quite as limited, but even President Obama, the idea of a honeymoon factor that presidents from both parties used to enjoy significantly is largely gone away.
I was interested in a couple of the tables where you talk about the most underrated presidents, Lyndon G. Johnson making that list, and overrated presidents. We could just talk about maybe the top two. Most underrated president, Jimmy Carter, the most overrated president, Kennedy.
Yeah, and so Kennedy, as long as we've been doing that question, Kennedy is always the wrong answer, right? And And one of the things that's kind of interesting, when you do some statistical analyses on trying to explain these ratings, is that one of the statistical factors that comes in that has a huge impact on how someone ranks or rates is whether or not they're assassinated, right? And so, but that actually has nothing to do with if they're a great president or not. It has to do with the fact their lives were tragically cut short. And so, so John F. Kennedy, I think there's the romance of Camelot, there's the, the youth and vigor, and there's the, and then there's of course the assassination tragedy and the kind of potential that was never fully realized that leads him, that kind of ironically leads our experts to rank him highly, but at the same time they know maybe they shouldn't. Jimmy Carter, I think part of that is, a growing appreciation for the man as a person, and his, humility and his, laudable behavior in an era where we don't see that kind of politician as much anymore. But I also think that there may be a kind of sympathy factor at work with the passing of his wife and, his, him in the last chapter of his own. And so, if I had to bet for the next time we do something like this, John F. Kennedy will still be at the top. I don't know if Jimmy Carter will be considered as underrated as he is right now.
It's interesting. When we talk about JFK, I think historians are not immune from this either. People pin what they hope his potential would be on him, and we think he would have done this had he lived, and he would have done that, and maybe he wouldn't have done Vietnam. Maybe that's what gets him highly ranked. But also, you mentioned youth and vigor. Yes, he was young for a president. Wasn't all that vigorous, though, as we found out later on in life. He was saddled with a lot of health problems.
That's a great point, although most Americans had no idea, kind of like the vast majority of Americans had no idea that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was in a wheelchair, right? That Kennedy was still operating at what was probably the tail end of a very deferential White House press corps and kind of a gentleman's agreement, if you will, to keep some of those personal elements out of coverage. And so instead, the Kennedy that was portrayed to the American people wasn't really challenged as much as if that were to happen today. When we even see it, say, with President Biden and his various kind of ailments, that it's not covered up to the extent that you might have said.
I can't believe that guy was driving on the wrong side of the street. That's completely dangerous. But the rich here in Napa County, nobody drives by following the law.